think Sean Payton still, still thinks about that. Of course, I mean he kind of made it known that he doesn't respect Nathaniel Hackett as a coach and that he did the worst coaching job in the history of the NFL. And then they lose at home to the guy who's the worst he's ever seen. And so I think Sean Payton has something extra for him this week, but at the same time, he's got to be careful and not try to do something extra. I think he's got to keep it simple and let the players do the playing. You can't do this, Sean. And so sitting up in your office and coming up with some genius thing that's going to best Nathaniel Hackett, I don't think is the way to go here. I think the way to go is to simply cater to what your players are doing well, follow what you did against Tampa Bay as a general blueprint, and let those guys go out and speak for you. You don't have to go, just like it's not Bo Nix versus Aaron Rodgers in tennis, it's not Sean Payton versus Nathaniel Hackett in tennis either. Sean Payton's got a rookie quarterback, and Nathaniel Hackett's got one of the best to ever do it.
Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Broncos and Bourbon. I'm your host, Phil Milani. Very excited about today's episode. Nate Jackson, the Broncos' former tight end and wide receiver, joins us. We get into a lot of different things, obviously talking about the Broncos win. What changed? How did this team look completely different from the first couple of weeks? And how can they continue that on this week as they get set to face the New York Jets? We talk a little bit about Aaron Rodgers, Bo Nix facing each other. The age difference there is a little bit interesting, and Bo had some interesting comments this week talking about playing against Aaron Rodgers. We talk about the loss of Alex Singleton. What does that mean for this defense now that they're on the road again, facing a future Hall of Famer in Aaron Rodgers, a guy who looked really sharp last time out against the New England Patriots. And by the way, this Jets team has had 10 days off here to get ready for the Broncos. So what does that mean for this Broncos defense? And then, of course, we talk a little Nathaniel Hackett, Sean Payton, round 2 here. Is that still a thing, or is that just in the past? Nate says no, that definitely still matters for Sean. So really enjoyed our conversation. Today's nightcap, the Bourbon review, is 1792 small batch. Maybe not something you're familiar with, not a household name here, but definitely readily available. It's under $30 and certainly a good bourbon for somebody who's just getting into drinking whiskey here. So that'll be our nightcap. So really hope that you enjoy the show. If you do, please like and subscribe to the channel. But with that, let's get to my conversation with Nate Jackson. Nate, thanks so much for joining us on the show. It means a lot to me just because, we've known each other for a little while now and done some stuff in the past. How you been doing?
I've been doing pretty well, man. I got a little baby at home, 5 weeks old. So actually 6 weeks now. So you know how it is, man. Not a ton of sleep going on. I was on the night shift last night. I woke up at 3:30 in the morning and fed the little one. It's a girl. Of course, she's stolen my heart, as all fathers can attest to having a girl. I have a 4-year-old boy, and that's a little different. He's awesome. He's a little rugrat though, and here comes along this girl, right? So we're pretty happy, but a little bit sleep deprived, Phil. But it's going well. It's football season, so it's exciting, right?
Well, that's awesome. Congratulations. I'm glad things are going so well, man. Let's talk a little bit about this Broncos team. I mean, the first 2 weeks they looked one way, and then last week against the Bucs, a completely different team. Where do you think that came from?
Simple. I mean, the offense figuring it out. So, the defense has been good for 3 straight games. I mean, holding the Seahawks to, I guess they did score 26, right? But some of that was because of turnovers the Broncos had, and they played pretty well, I thought. And then holding Pittsburgh to 13. The Broncos' defense is top 10 in pretty much every category right now. So it wasn't a defensive problem. Those first 2 losses, in my mind, it wasn't a special teams problem. It was an offense problem, and it's. I mean, you can't point to one person. You can't say, Bo Nix was a rookie, and that's why they lost. I think everyone has some blame for that. I think the receivers weren't catching the ball. I think the offensive line wasn't blocking very well. And I think Bo wasn't playing well. And when nobody's playing well, who's at fault? Probably the coaches, right? And so you look at the coaches, the offensive coaching staff, but in particular Sean Payton. I know he doesn't want to be blamed for that because he is a genius offensive coach, carries that moniker. He's got a Super Bowl win under his belt. But I don't think the game plans were great these first couple weeks. And so I think that he looked in the mirror and figured out what he could do better to take some pressure off Bo. The offensive operation was very clunky those first 2 weeks. Having a hard time getting out the huddle, breaking the huddle with 8 seconds left on the play clock, running up to the line of scrimmage. 3, 2, 1, throw the motion guy across. I mean, that is hell for a rookie quarterback who actually needs to look at the defense and see what the defense is doing. There's a reason why you get to the line of scrimmage early. That's to look and survey the defense and call out some players and some blitzers and let the offensive line communicate about who they're going to block. When you run to the line of scrimmage with 5 seconds left on the clock, you can't do any of that, right? And so you're only worried about your side of the ball, and guys don't even know where they're supposed to be. It was a sort of a hectic operation. They cleaned that up. Bo looked very much more comfortable. The receivers were making plays, actually catching the rock. I didn't see any drops, I don't think, on Sunday against the Bucs. And then the offensive line really gave them time. They looked really good against the game opponent. So I think offensively they got to figure it out in week 3, and that's why they got the win.
Yeah, what do you think that Bo did in particular that allowed him to have that success? I mean, certainly winning the coin toss, taking the ball and marching right down the field, that probably gave him a ton of confidence.
Yeah, and it's something we haven't seen the Broncos do in a while, right? Take that opening kickoff down and score a touchdown. When I played for the Broncos 03 to 08, we prided ourselves on scoring on that opening drive. It really changes the dynamic of the game when you can do that. The Broncos haven't done that in a long time. 3 and out, put your defense on the field, and then they got to play catch-up, right? And then you're behind a possession right off the bat. And so I think, like you said, that opening drive touchdown, huge for them confidence-wise. But I think, technically speaking, Bo Nix just felt more comfortable back there. I think the game plan was a little simpler for him. They did try to get out of the huddle quicker. Sean Payton was quicker on the plays, so he got to the line of scrimmage with 12, 15 seconds left, so he could see what was going on. So he was able to just allow the defense to indicate where they were going a little bit more, and he could decide where he was going with the football a little more decisively. But then there's also receivers making plays on the ball. There's a connection thing that happens between receivers and quarterbacks that doesn't just come at the snap of a finger. You want it to happen. You got the players. Bo Nix is very talented. Courtland Sutton is very talented. But what makes them talented together and productive together? Well, it's the repetition, the familiarity, the connection, getting to know each other on and off the field, okay? And going through something together. And that opening play of the game, offensive play, a back shoulder throw to Courtland Sutton that got the ball rolling, 22-yard gain, right? If that's incomplete, it brings up 2nd and 10. Let's say you don't convert, you 3 and out, you punt. It's a different game.
Yeah.
But the very next play is a 30-something yarder to Josh Reynolds, right? And so it's a cascading sort of experience when one guy makes a play, the other guy makes a play, and you feel that momentum. All these guys are playmakers. We're trying to unlock the playmakers in all these professional football players. Courtland Sutton, that back shoulder throw, it's a timing throw, it's a touch, it's a feel. It's not something you just step on a football field and do. And so it's hard for a rookie quarterback to make that connection on a back shoulder throw. The fact that he did that on the first play of the game shows me a lot. It shows me that Bo and Courtland's connection is growing, shows me his confidence in Courtland is growing, shows me that Sean Payton's confidence in those guys is growing, and it shows me what Sean Payton believes is important for his team, and it is that connection between Courtland and Bo, because they script those first 15 plays, and that first play on the play sheet is the one you want to start with. And so when you're starting with that back shoulder throw, it shows me how you want the spark that you want. And that's the spark he wanted, and he got it. And I think it was really important for this team to get that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this over the years, like with Mahomes and like Kelsey, or even way back in the day with Elway and Shannon. Like they just kind of know where each other are on the field, and then it makes it just so hard to defend. I was going to ask you about Bo Nix's athleticism. We saw him get out of the pocket a little bit. We've seen him really take off down the field. He had 47 yards rushing. You played with Jake. How can a quarterback's athleticism help you as a pass catcher?
Yeah, immensely, because they can extend the play, and then you can find yourself getting open late. At practice, every once in a while, we would do a drill called scramble drill, and that is when the quarterback gets out of the pocket, as a receiver down the field, you have to give him a throw. And depending where you are on the field, you either come back towards him, you go deep, or you come parallel to him. And, as he's running, towards the sideline, you run with him and give him a throw on that sideline. So all those guys drill that at practice. And when you have a quarterback who is athletic like Bo and sneaky athletic, I mean, I think people are taking notice now of how athletic he is, and defensive coordinators are going to start paying attention to that. There was a couple designed runs that the Broncos did to him, and I think that they should be careful with that stuff because, two quarterbacks in the NFL, two, started every game for their team last year. Only two. Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. Every other team at one point during the season had to start a backup because this game is very brutal and these guys do get hurt. Now, Josh Allen runs the football a lot and was able to stay healthy. That's an anomaly, though. Most of these guys, you take off running, they're coming for you, and you're going to eventually get hurt. And so I think they should be careful with trying to go to that well too much too early with Bo, because that's not going to be the key for his longevity in the league. His key is going to be in the pocket, processing, dissecting, distributing the ball to his guys. But at the same time, a guy who's athletic and can make plays with his legs isn't a huge asset to your team. He just has to be smart about how he does it, right? And he was incredibly smart in the game with how he did it. I don't think he took one hit. Did he actually get hit?
Yeah, I don't think
right.
so.
And so being aware of everything going on around you and getting down, that's huge. Inevitably, the game will catch you in a moment unawares and you will get hit. That's how it is for these quarterbacks. And a lot of them are more fragile than the other guys around them. And so they eventually do sustain an injury, and we hope Bo doesn't. But a quarterback who can get outside the pocket like him, incredibly valuable to an offense. The wide zone that we did, the stretch zone, a lot of keepers came off of that, a lot of the play action, and Jake would get out of the pocket and just make magic happen, whether he was dumping it off, whether he was throwing the deep cross, whether he was throwing down the field, or he was taking off and getting it with his legs. So there's a lot of options there for a smart quarterback who knows how to get down.
You kind of mentioned it a little bit there, but how do you think defenses are going to adjust here to what they've seen from the Broncos offense? Because to me, if like the Broncos scored that first touchdown, it felt like the Bucs were behind the ball a little bit right off the bat. And maybe they took the Broncos for granted a little bit. It kind of felt like that, maybe a letdown game for the Bucs a little bit. I do think the Broncos played well there, but certainly the Jets coming off 10 days rest here, they're not going to take the Broncos lightly. How do you think defenses will adjust as there's more tape now on Bo?
Yeah, that's a really good question because, it's hard to tell what a defensive coordinator really sees Bo as. Do they see him as a running quarterback, a la, obviously not Lamar Jackson, but one of the ways that you try to stop Lamar Jackson is you put like a spy on him that just kind of waits for him to run and then follows him, right? And doesn't let him break the line of scrimmage. You also do this thing called the mush rush, where you kind of don't really try to get to him and sack him, but you just kind of try to collapse the pocket and keep him in the pocket. The question is, but that strategy is often employed on a guy who they don't believe can beat you in the pocket. Do you think Bo can beat you from inside the pocket? Maybe they don't yet, because the first two games he didn't look great inside the pocket, but that's when you collapse the pocket. So the offensive line becomes incredibly important. I think what you're going to see with Bo is to continue to try to confuse him, to do a lot of simulated pressures, right? Like they'll come at him, they'll blitz guys, but they'll also simulate blitz guys and drop them out. And so the NFL defenses have become very good at that. Like you think they're bringing 6, but they're not. They're actually bringing 5, but the 2 guys you thought were coming drop out, and these guys are coming from here, and all of a sudden the coverage is confusing. And if you do that also, that's why the operation's so important, getting to the line of scrimmage with enough time to see these guys do that. And if you don't see them do that, and then it becomes even more confusing. So I think they'll continue to simulate pressure. They'll continue to try to bring pressure. They'll probably put a spy on him. I don't think they're going to do the mush rush thing, but they'll probably, continue to. I don't think the Broncos receivers have been great versus man coverage, and so I think they're going to see a lot of man, and he's going to face some pressure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that if you look at trying to beat this Broncos team, you say, hey, we're going to make you throw from inside the pocket. We're going to try and confuse you, and we're going to try and make life tough for you, Bo. Like, we're not going to let you beat us, essentially. I think that's you. I mean, that's I bet you Robert Saleh is got some plays ready to go here to try and confuse Bo. You mentioned the pass catchers, the playmakers for this Broncos offense. Courtland, a little bit of a slow start, Marvin Mims nowhere to be found. What do you think's going on with these guys? Is it just the chemistry issue, like you mentioned there, or is there something else that it's just not clicking right now?
Yeah, I think it's a chemistry issue, and I think it's a variety of things. You don't have as much time in the offseason together as you used to. The CBA kind of dictates that you stay away a little more. There's not as much. You don't have double days during training camp. Just the sheer number of repetitions are not there to have that kind of connection. Sean Payton is new here. And so there's nobody here other than, like, I guess, L.J. Humphrey and Adam Troutman, who sort of know his offense from back in New Orleans. But when I got to the Broncos in 2003, I was a rookie. It wasn't up to the coaches necessarily to tell me everything. I could just watch the veterans. Everybody knew the offense. Everyone who was already there knew it. And so the young guys could fall in, not by having to ask coach or just everybody look at the coach for the answers, but for the veterans in the room who knew what to do. Rod Smith's locker was right next to me. I just did what Rod did. He was a receiver. I was a receiver. He showed me the way. He showed us all the way. And every single position group had that guy in it. Shannon Sharp was was in there at tight end. Al Wilson was a linebacker. Trevor Price was a defensive end. Tom Nalen and all those guys were across the offensive line. And so it was clear where we were supposed to be, not because the coaches had to tell us everything. And I think the Broncos now don't really have that familiarity with the system. And so it's a little bit confusing. And Sean Payton's offenses are notoriously difficult to understand and wordy. The language, Phil, around these offenses is incredibly difficult to master. It's confusing. They're words that don't mean the same thing in real life that they mean here on the football field. And so it's like, what are we doing? It was an interesting moment where I think it was this last week. They got the delay of game down in that first drive, right? Mm-hmm. And it was kind of more of the same operational stuff. Sean Payton, that was on him. Took him a long time to get the play out of his mouth. But when I was watching the huddle, right? So when Bo started talking to these guys, it took him 9 seconds to get the play out of his mouth. That's a long play.
Yeah.
And so just that it fills you with a sort of confusion or at least reluctance out on the field that doesn't allow you to really play free. Football is pretty simple, and we make it more complicated than it is. Offensive football is about exploiting the open spaces that the defense presents to you. You got to get past their front guys, and once you get past the front, there's a secondary area that's full of holes. You got to find those holes and exploit them. As a receiver, you got to run to them, and as a quarterback, you got to throw to them. And you don't want to make it too complicated for a coach. These guys are very used to making plays. Either it's man or it's zone. If it's man, we do this. If it's zone, we find that zone. And ultimately, the more familiarity I think they get with the language around this offense, and the more Sean Payton looks in the mirror and decides to pare it down and realizes this is a new group of guys. I got to start with square one here and build something around them, not around what I used to do. I think they'll get better and better.
I saw Bo said something after one of those first two games. He was like, well, our offense has to be complicated because defenses are so complicated these days. Do you think that that's true? Or Sean's a smart guy. Why is he putting Bo in that spot?
Yeah, I think the idea is that the defenses are incredibly complicated because of what we were talking about before, the simulated pressures and the disguises. Ultimately, you're either, like I said, you're in man or you're in zone. If you're in man, you got to beat the guy who's on your hip trying to stay with you. If you're in zone, there are areas around you where you should stop, turn around, and make yourself a friendly presence for the thrower. What you call those zones, that's where it becomes complicated, right? Mm-hmm. What is the name of this? I don't know, coach, but I know that I should sit down right there. And so there's an awareness, a body awareness when you're running through zones as a receiver, understanding the concepts, not just your route, but what you're trying to accomplish, because each route is always tied to the other routes, right? There's 5 eligible receivers. Yes, so we're trying to exploit these open spaces by putting defensive players in conflict and making them choose between one of us. And if they choose me, I throw to the other guy, or the other guy gets the ball. If they choose him, I'll be open. But I have to understand where those zones are. But it's not about understanding what it's called.
Yeah.
It's about understanding a feel for it and being able to sit. And a lot of that is the connection that you have with the guy. There's so much telepathic, telekinetic stuff
Instinct.
happening.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, the best connections I've ever had with quarterbacks, it wasn't about, we didn't have to talk about stuff. It was just, we understood. And so this comes from just knowing each other and being around each other. But I think that, there is a tendency with these offensive coaches to fill these players' minds with so many terms where they have to answer. I mean, they'll take tests the night before the game and do all this stuff that's just like kind of jumbles your brain a bit. And then you got all these checks. If they do this, we do this. If they do this, we do this. Then it can get really difficult because you're stepping to the line of scrimmage, not even knowing what you're going to be doing. And at the very last minute, they snap it, and you're thinking as you come off the ball. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't be thinking out there. You should be reacting, right?
Sometimes maybe like the coach, you think a little ego comes into it. They're like, hey, I want to be considered this genius, so I got to make this really complicated offense.
Yeah, not a little ego, Phil, a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't become an offensive genius by having a vanilla offense that relies on the running game. Like as successful as the Ravens have been, I mean, none of their offensive coordinators have been called geniuses in a long time, right?
Yeah.
But then again, they haven't won a big one. They've had great regular seasons and have lost the playoffs, and kind of inexplicably, because the running game is what's supposed to propel you in the playoffs, or at least allow you
defense,
to make it far, right? And a good defense. So, but you're right. Like all these geniuses, and they want to be considered offensive geniuses. They want to go to the Hall of Fame. They want to put up the big numbers. Sean Payton has done that in the past. Top 5 in the NFL in points and yards, and for many years, and in New Orleans, and kind of was given that label with Drew Brees. And so he wants that back. He wants that back. He doesn't want to win these dirty games where it's like 16-13. I don't think that's what he likes. But it's also a different NFL now. Like, look around the league. I mean, the points aren't being put up like they were before. The touchdowns aren't being thrown. The defense has gained the upper hand somehow. And I think, I have my own theories about that. But I think that you got to work with what you have and not try to, reignite the flames of yesteryear.
Yeah. What do you think? You have a theory about that? Because it feels like in the NFL, there's always like these cycles, okay, if other teams are getting lighter and faster out there, we're going to get bigger and stronger. And then it just kind of like evolves, and it constantly goes around and around and around.
Yeah, I think it's a confluence of factors. You talk about the Vic Fangio influence of the cover 2 shell and keeping everything in front of guys, and not a lot of big plays anymore. And guys aren't breaking tackles much either, which is, I think, a product of just not doing it as much, just not being out there thumping as much, doing physical practices. I mean, I know you don't bring guys to the ground during practice, but at the same time, like, 2-a-days in pads makes you much more comfortable with contact, and you're able to break tackles better. In addition to that, like 2020, the COVID year, was the kind of, I think, the high watermark of the passing game in the NFL. And it was because there was no fans in the stands. There were no fans in the stands, which allowed quarterbacks to use the snap count on the road, and there was no opposition, and there was no noise, and they could call everything out and change the play and talk to everybody. If you look at the numbers in 2020, those numbers, every single veteran quarterback had a completion percentage 2 or 3% higher than his career average that year. Yeah. More touchdowns thrown that year than ever before. Fewer interceptions thrown that year than ever before. More points because no fans were in the stands. But COVID was going on. It made everybody crazy. The NFL Players Union used those inflated numbers as justification for an argument that the players should not be at the facility much. They signed a new CBA, and they said, look, you guys look at how good football was when you guys didn't even have to go to practice.
Yeah.
So going forward, we're going to spend less time at the facility. We want fewer padded practices. We want single practices, not double days during training camp. And it sounded great at the time, because look at these numbers we just put up. Well, what people didn't understand was that it was because there was no fans making things harder for opposing offenses. And ever since then, the offenses have been on not a free fall, but a steady decline as far as numbers, touchdown passes, and all that. Defenses have started to regain the upper hand since that. Even though you try to protect quarterbacks, you try to create rules for them to be successful, it still is not really working. And I think it's because of the limited reps and the lack of ability to break tackles by these ball catchers.
That's really interesting, Nate. I like that. You're talking about the chemistry. The Broncos are spending the week out in West Virginia at the Greenbrier there. You like that they're doing this in the middle of the regular season? It's a little rare, but maybe it'll help with the chemistry. Or do you think, hey, this is going to mess up our routine here. Let's there's going to be some distractions here. What do you think about them staying out there?
I have mixed feelings about it. I think that it's a long time, 10 days to spend away from your family and your home and all that. So number one, conditions have to be good there. You have to like what you got and feel comfortable. You don't want to feel like you're in barracks or something where it's just like you're isolated. But at the same time, that kind of isolation does create a bond and a camaraderie if you can play it the right way as a coach. Give them some free time and listen to them and give them some treats and some moments to share some experiences. Because these days, with these things we carry around everywhere we go,
Yep.
everyone's on them all the time. They don't, and it's just like, how well do these guys know each other? How hard is it to build a team of guys who are brothers who love each other these days? I think it's a lot harder from the reasons I was mentioning about, COVID restrictions, and they're not at the facility very much. And they just, everyone kind of goes home, and when they're in the locker room, they're sitting on their phones. And it's just, I think it's harder to build a team now than it was in the past. And I think that's why the Chiefs have such a leg up on everyone, because this team building's been going on with them for a decade or more. I mean, since Andy Reid got there, right? And so the core of that team has been together long before COVID even. And then, so I think it could be good for the Broncos to get away, to spend some time together. Time will tell if it makes them a better team. But I'm sure some of them are missing their families and missing their kids. But at the same time, I'm sure some of them are happy to get away because there are a lot of distractions at home. In fact, there's fewer distractions on the road. I always liked going on the road because you just kind of get away from your routine and the same thing and the same seat you're sitting in and the same car and the same bed. You know what I mean? Like, you get away from any sort of pressures that you have at home, and sometimes that's exactly what you need.
Interesting. Yeah. Just seeing the shots of them out there, I was like, oh, it kind of looks like a high school field. The grass was in good condition, but it kind of looked just like, hey, you've got this world-class facility back at home. Why not just stick with that? But that makes sense. I do think that some team building is important. I know that, like, I was around those Peyton Manning teams very closely, and they had a great bond together, and they did a lot of stuff outside of the football arena to build those bonds. I was going to ask you about this too. I saw the other day Bo was asked about facing Aaron Rodgers. And it was kind of interesting because I was expecting an answer from him, like sort of just textbook, like, hey, I'm not worried about that. I'm focused on the defense. I know that our defense is going to have a tough time going against Aaron Rodgers. We got to keep up on our end. And, maybe after the game I'll say hi. But Bo said something that kind of was interesting, like it was a very honest answer. And he was like, hey, I grew up watching Aaron Rodgers. And he was sort of really excited about the fact that he was going to be able to, face him and get to meet him. What do you make of that? Like, do you think that's kind of interesting, or do you think that you enjoy the real answer there?
No, I like it. I mean, I think that those Aaron Rodgers is the last of a dying breed. He's the last of that group of guys that the Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers era, Eli Manning, of those guys who I think were in the sweet spot of the passing renaissance that took over the NFL for a while. And I think he represents something that's kind of gone the way of the dinosaur, the ultimate sort of processor, the guy the guy who sees everything, sees the whole field, understands everything he sees on defense. Patrick Mahomes might be sort of the guy who's doing that. But some of the older quarterbacks in the NFL don't do it like that. Like Kirk Cousins doesn't do it like Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson, as we know, doesn't do it like Aaron Rodgers. So I think Aaron Rodgers, to those guys, represents an excellence at that position that is rare and that they respect, And he's 16 years older than Bo. Bo's 24.
Yeah, it's crazy, huh?
And so Bo was 8-ish when Aaron Rodgers took over in Green Bay and started playing. And so he has seen him since his memory began, right? And so it is something that, like, as you're falling in love with the sport, the people who are making you understand what that sport means, all of a sudden you're playing against them. I think that was something that kind of honesty is a good thing to share. Now, that said, as Sean Payton has alluded to before, this isn't tennis, right?
Yeah.
So they're not playing against each other.
Yeah.
And so you can't be in awe of that and be worrying about that. You got to go out there and lead your team. And when you see him out there on the field, he's just like Mike Shanahan used to say, our opponents are nameless, faceless opponents. We don't care who they are. We're going there to destroy them. And he's got to feel the same thing on game day.
Yeah, I thought for sure he was going to give that answer, just like, hey, I'm
Yeah.
not facing Aaron Rodgers, blah, blah, blah.
Right,
But he
right.
was just like, no, he was kind of giddy a little bit about the idea that he's going to be on the same field as Aaron Rodgers. So I did think that was a little interesting. Did you ever have a moment like that when you were playing? Like, holy smokes, this guy's out on the same field here?
Well, in 2005, here in Denver, I was making the transition to tight end. I had spent my first 2 years on the as a receiver. That off season, I had transitioned to tight end, so it was my first mini camp as a tight end. But we signed Jerry Rice, and so Jerry Rice was all of a sudden, and he was a childhood hero of mine. I mean, he was,
Yeah, Bay Area.
you
Yeah.
know, I don't know if Bo was a Packers fan, but I was a 49ers fan. And I lived in the Bay Area. The 49ers were my heroes. I had Jerry Rice posters on my wall, and he was 43 at the time, and I think I was 25 or 26. So it was about the same age difference. Actually, even more. He was 18 years older than I was, and so yeah. Jerry all of a sudden was sharing a locker room with me, and we were in the huddle together, me and Jerry Rice, and so that was pretty surreal to see Jerry. I was also on the Niners for a minute with Terrell Owens, and I was a 49er fan and had gone to the famous Packers playoff game where he caught that ball
Oh,
from
yeah.
Steve Young
Yeah.
to end the game, with no time left, and so that was a huge moment in my fandom. And then 3 or 4 years later, there I was in the meeting rooms with Terrell Owens and out on the field with him. So that he was a beast. He did some things out there that were just incredible. So those two guys, I think, gave me those moments.
Uh, let's talk about this Broncos defense a little bit. Have you been surprised by how well they've played? Obviously, Alex Singleton is a huge blow, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The guy's had 1,000,000 tackles, never leaves the field. But have you been surprised at how well they've been able to play these first 3 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, surprised. I wouldn't say surprised because I saw some of that last year, and the offense just didn't hold up their end of the bargain last year, and weren't able to kind of put up points on the board. So the defensive performances went unnoticed. But I think that eventually they would bend, and eventually they would break late in the game last year. But I think they showed some signs of stiffening up, especially after that run where they were pretty bad last year in the 70-point game they gave up to the Dolphins. But after that, I think they made a lot of improvements. And, Alex Singleton was talking in the offseason about how much better he felt in the system with Vance Joseph being there for a second year, and how much cleaner it felt, how much crisper everyone was with the terminology and what was expected of them, and how much he expected them to improve. And so when I heard him saying that, during mini camps, I believed it, and I was ready to see what I have seen. But Alex Singleton himself is going to be very difficult to replace. I mean, like you talked about, all the tackles. And to me, he's just the heartbeat of that defense, and just the absolute tip of the spear, was around the ball every moment, was the energetic sort of pace setter for everyone out there. And so someone's going to have to step up and be that guy. And I think that's going to be really hard to find.
Yeah, I mean, this offseason they lost Justin Simmons, they lost Josie Jewell. Those are like two of the big leaders out there. And then now Alex Singleton. I just think he might not be that household name that everybody in the NFL knows, but he was really the guy for this Broncos defense that, like you mentioned, always around the ball. So I do think that's going to be a huge loss.
Oh yeah, yeah, and just his story. I mean, he's 31 years old. He didn't play, in the NFL until he was 26. He bounced around in the CFL. He played for the Eagles, but he just kind of just kept going and kept coming, and tore his ACL in the first half, and
Crazy.
played the rest of the game and led the team in tackles. And so I think
How do you do that?
Yeah. Because he's an animal, and that's kind of that's the ethos that's guided him to this point. And so it's like, you don't turn that off. And even afterward the game, he was interviewed, didn't mention anything about his knee. He's just talking about how he's excited to have a week with the guys, and looking forward to the Jets. I mean, the guy is not. He just didn't stop, and now he's going to have to. And it's just your heart goes out to him because he's worked so hard to get here, and then he signed a nice contract, and he's a team leader, and everybody's looking at him to be the pace setter, and all of a sudden he's got to disappear, because those guys literally disappear from our consciousness after that happens. So he's going to have his surgery. He's going to be on his own schedule now, and he's not going to be with the guys anymore. And it's just kind of a bummer that that's going to be his experience after kind of putting in all this work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough league to just continuously make it and perform like that. So I had a couple more on the Broncos here, and then we'll move on.
Cool.
Last year, Nathaniel Hackett, the Jets come back to Denver. It's the main storyline, especially after what Sean Payton said last offseason. Hackett comes in, they get the win. Do you think that serves as a little bit of motivation heading into this one this week, or is that, hey, that's the past?
I think for the players, it's the past. I don't think they really care about that. I think Sean Payton still thinks about that. Of course, I mean he kind of made it known that he doesn't respect Nathaniel Hackett as a coach, and that he did the worst coaching job in the history of the NFL. And then they lose at home to the guy who's the worst he's ever seen. And so I think Sean Payton has something extra for him this week, but at the same time, he's got to be careful and not try to do something extra. I think he's got to keep it simple and let the players do the playing. You can't do this, Sean. And so sitting up in your office and coming up with some genius thing that's going to best Nathaniel Hackett, I don't think is the way to go here. I think the way to go is to simply cater to what your players are doing well, follow what you did against Tampa Bay as a general blueprint, and let those guys go out and speak for you. You don't have to go, just like it's not Bo Nix versus Aaron Rodgers in tennis, it's not Sean Payton versus Nathaniel Hackett in tennis either. Sean Payton's got a rookie quarterback, and Nathaniel Hackett's got one of the best to ever do it. So it's a lot. So Nathaniel Hackett's acumen is being helped along by Aaron Rodgers and his ability to get him out of bad plays and things like that. So this is not this is not Sean Payton versus Nathaniel Hackett, but and I don't think the players care much about it, but I know Sean Payton is thinking about it. Absolutely.
I mean, he's a human being, right? I mean, you can't just put that behind you, especially after Hackett winning last year, and he got the game ball afterwards, and the Jets sort of after the game made it a bigger thing, and so I think that these guys, they're as competitive as they come, so hey, let's go round 2 here. It's on. So I mean, I think that's natural.
And let's not forget Zach Wilson's on this roster too now. So who knows, hopefully Bo doesn't have to come out of the game, but if he did, there goes Zach. I mean, I don't know who would go in. Jarrett Stidham
I think Jarrett is a
Zach
backup, and then Zach has been like that emergency guy who could come in.
Okay.
But hey, you never know. I mean, some of these games are crazy, so. What do you think about? I like that they kept Zach Wilson because you see these quarterbacks go down around the league, and even I heard Adam Schefter talking. Hey, Zach Wilson could be a trade candidate, like for Miami or wherever. Seemed like a smart move to keep a guy like Zach around.
Yeah, I was really impressed with what I saw from him, particularly in the preseason games. Practice was hard to get a gauge on these guys just because they were so tightly controlled, really. I mean, they were always taking the obvious guy right in front. I mean, you go to a training camp practice, they all look the same, didn't they? I mean, from day to day. So they were clearly internalizing coaching in the same way, making the same decisions, and had it beaten into their heads to take these certain reads versus these certain looks, and they were prepared for what that look was going to be going into practice. And so they stepped out onto the field in each rep. They knew where they were going pretty much before they went there. But that's not how a game is. And Zach Wilson has a lot of game experience, a lot more than these other two guys. And he's got he's very athletic. He's got a pretty live arm, and he's probably learned a lot from what he's gone through. I mean, there's a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL who are showing that they've learned a lot from what they've gone through. They've performed poorly in the past, and now they're doing a lot better. Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, some of these guys who are getting second chances or third or fourth chances elsewhere are performing. So I think Zach Wilson's a guy who I'm intrigued by. I would rather Zach Wilson be the backup personally than Jarrett Stidham. I think he has an ability to go out there and win you a game more so than Jarrett does. And, there's an idea that the backup quarterback's got to be a guy who can go out there and just not screw it up for you, just hand the ball off and just do. But what if you're down 14, What about that? Like, what if you're down 7? And what if you're down 8, with 2 minutes left? Or what if your guy's going to be out for 5 weeks and you're in the playoff hunt? Like, who's the guy you're going to go out there and win with? And I think Zach Wilson's probably a little bit better for that job than Jarrett, but I know that Sean Payton likes Jarrett Stidham a lot as well.
Yeah. I mean, Zach has a lot more game experience, so that does make sense.
Way more.
And then last one for you. I know that you're very close with Mike Shanahan here. Do you see any similarities to maybe not their offenses and all that, but any similarities between Sean Payton and Mike Shanahan? I know they went to the same college and everything, but just sort of the way that they lead, the way that they motivate, the way that they run the whole building. You see any similarities between those two guys?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a lot of similarities. And I don't know if it's because of the Eastern Illinois sort of ethos kind of rubbed off on them or what it is, but those are guys who obsess over the details and everything's got to be right. And I'm talking about everything. I mean, it's not just the play run correctly, but it's every blade of grass on the field has to look right. You know, the food has to be right. The the travel experience has to be the right way. The ticket process has to be the right way for the families and the friends. The buses have to be the right buses. The hotel has to be the right hotel. Greenbrier, obviously, a priority there.
Yeah.
Everything has to be perfect on the field as well. Sean Payton's talked about all the different situations, you know, so he'll stop practice and talk about these situations and preparing guys intellectually to be prepared for anything that happens in the game. And a lot of times these situations don't even come up in the course of a game, but you cover them just in case they do. If they do, you'll be ready because it will be the difference between winning and losing. Mike Shanahan used to always say you got to do the little things the right way. And I think that Sean Payton does the same thing. It's about the little things. And if you do those, the big things will take care of themselves. And so I see a lot of similarities between those guys.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, great perspective there. Really enjoyed the piece that you wrote last year on Shanahan. That was
Thanks.
awesome, and definitely think that he needs to be heading to Canton here very soon. So,
Oh, yeah.
very excited about that. Hopefully, coming up soon here. Okay, ready for a Phil's Five segment here.
Let's
Nate,
do it.
some rapid fire questions.
Coincidentally, I've got 5% on my battery here.
Oh my gosh!
Unfortunately.
Okay, we'll go fast here.
Yeah.
We'll speed it
Sorry.
up here. No, okay. You kind of talked about this a little bit, but who's your favorite player growing up?
It's got to be Jerry Rice.
That's your guy. That's your guy.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was him. Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, but Jerry ended up being the guy because I wanted to be a receiver. So,
Okay. Who is your favorite teammate?
favorite teammate ever? I'd say Jake Plummer.
Yeah, you guys kind of
Yeah,
got
he was-
that same kind of vibe, that chill kind of,
Oh, yeah.
it seems like you.
But
guys
also
are
a
the same
fierce competitor. Would do anything for his teammates. Was one of the guys. Obviously, a quarterback makes way more money and is way more idolized than anybody else on the field. But he didn't act that way in the locker room at all. He was very much one of the fellas and a great friend to this day.
And favorite play from your career? Favorite play?
Favorite play. I'd probably say my first touchdown. It was only a 1 yard touchdown. It was on a goal line play, but it was a long time coming. It took me 4 years to get there. In college, I scored a ton of touchdowns and had caught a lot of passes as a receiver, and I figured it was just going to keep happening in the NFL, like we all did, right? And then you get there, you realize it's a little different. So it took me a while to get there, and when I finally did, my mom and my dad were in that end zone where it happened, and the night before the game, I knew we had this certain goal line package in, and I showed my dad on the playbook. If we get down there and I do this motion, I'm getting the ball. And I showed him the exact play, and it ended up being right in front of him and the same motion. I caught the ball right in front of them for a touchdown. So I think that was probably my favorite play.
What an awesome moment.
Yeah.
Okay, best player you ever faced?
Ever faced Champ Bailey. He was, he was a teammate, but I faced him every day at practice because I was, at that time early on in my receiver career running a scout team, and he was first team defense. So every day, every play, I'm lining up against Champ and really getting to improve my game going against the best in the world. He was so calm, so collected, so smart, never looked like he was breaking a sweat, was never sweating, was never out of breath, but was always in the right spot, and was just a phenomenal athlete and a great teammate.
The best. Champ was the best.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last one here. What's the best lesson you ever learned from a coach?
Best lesson I ever learned from a coach. That's a good one. I had this tight end coach who was kind of an asshole, but he would always say that attitude and effort are non-negotiable. And I think that's important in football because you're going to make mistakes. Sometimes you're not going to know where you're supposed to be. You're going to drop the ball or whatever it is. But the way you come out here and the effort that you put out has to be a constant. And if it is a constant, you are going to improve and you're going to be a good teammate. And then so, there's a lot of stuff I learned from Mike Shanahan about preparation, about reading defenses, about technique and things that are important. But I think the attitude and effort being a constant is a really valuable lesson for anybody to learn in life. Not just sports, but every day going to work, being a parent, just being out there and just trying your hardest and doing so with a positive attitude.
Totally. I love it. I love it. Okay, in the final segment here, career advice.
Yeah.
What would you tell somebody who's maybe this is their first fall away from the NFL? Maybe they're
Yeah.
going through a transition here. What's some advice to somebody who's in that position that they're going through a little bit of a career transition?
Yeah, well, ideally, you're not starting from square one then, and you kind of have during your career started to dabble in things that you care about outside of football. So in the off season, whether it's an internship or doing just picking up something else and starting to learn a different skill, or reading about something that you're interested in, or talking to people about something that you find interest in. Unless you're trying to be a coach or a media member, if you want to do something in a different field, it helps you to start doing that while you're in the NFL. Secondly, though, it's really hard when you leave football to figure out what to do with yourself because your itinerary is gone. The coaches are gone. Some people telling you what to do are gone. The doctors who used to hang around you are gone. Everyone's gone, and you feel very, very alone. So find a new team. Find a new team to be around, someone that can hold you to account, make a schedule, try to keep that schedule. But also don't wait until your money runs out to try to figure out what to do next. Take the time you need to grieve and to mourn that old life, losing that old life, but also move in the right direction. Make some calls, set up some meetings, start doing the things that you care about and leading towards something that will eventually bear fruit. But also, you're not going to find another job that starts off at $600,000, probably. So get ready to start at the bottom of the totem pole again, and that might mean taking a $40,000 a year job. That's okay. Football players don't want to do that, so they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, then 5 years later, you look up, your money's gone. So be okay with starting at the bottom.
Great lesson there. I think that could help anybody who's going through any kind of career change. So, Nate, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I love the stuff you're doing with Dumb Jock, Guerrilla Sports. Love keeping up with all of that. So, best of luck, and really appreciate your time today, man.
Thanks, Phil. I'm happy that you got this going on. It's really exciting to see you finding a new endeavor and love hearing your voice in the market. So best of luck to you as well.
Oh, thanks, Nate. It's been great catching up with guys like you and still having a voice. So I really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
All right, man. See ya.
My thanks to Nate Jackson for spending some time here on Broncos and Bourbon. Nate and I have known each other for quite some time now, and we used to do a lot of different work together. So fun to be able to reconnect here on Broncos and Bourbon. This is going to be a heck of a test here for the Broncos, and I think that as long as they continue to make the game simple for Bo Nix, kind of like what Nate was saying there, let him use his athleticism, get him outside of the pocket, let him build his confidence early in this game. I think that you're going to see a Broncos team that is coming out recharged here. That being said, I don't think that the Jets are going to overlook this Broncos team the same way that the Buccaneers did. I think that winning that game last week let opposing teams know, like, look, hey, Bo can do some things to beat you, so you got to be careful here. The interesting thing to me is, like, how much will the Jets blitz Bo Nix? How much will they try to get that pressure by bringing extra guys? Because the one thing that you got to guard against there is Bo slipping out. He'll beat you downfield with his legs there. So I think that that's going to be really interesting. Hopefully Sean Payton is able to put Bo in some really good positions again. And like we talked about there with Nate, don't get that evil genius kind of like mentality where I'm going to out scheme you. No, just make this thing simple. Put Bo in the best position to succeed, and let this thing grow. It's all about getting better week to week. Can this team improve upon what it did against the Buccaneers? On the other side of the ball, I mean, we talked about it there. Losing Alex Singleton, that is huge. How are they going to relay the play call in? What's the operation going to be like for this team? That's going to be very interesting on the defensive side of the ball. PS2 is going to be faced with another challenge there with Garrett Wilson. So I look for this game to be close if the Broncos are playing well. If the Broncos are playing well, I think this thing could be close and they got a chance. If the defense is swarming around Bo and guys aren't making plays around him, we don't see Jaleel McLaughlin using that speed and that juke move out there. If those kind of things aren't happening and this team isn't playing with that juice, that energy, I think it might be a long day. So we'll know right off the bat what kind of energy the Broncos come back with. Was it great that they spend a week together in the at the Greenbrier there, or hey, was that just a little too much? Was there too many distractions, being away from home, being away from the routine, and maybe they're tired? Hey, sleeping 10 days on the road there, maybe they're going to come out a little flat. We'll know right away, and we'll have to see what kind of energy this Broncos team comes out with. So with that, let's get to my recap here, our nightcap, I mean. This is 1792 small batch. This is from Barton. And, I must say that I've never tried this before. I've never really even heard of 1792. But doing a little bit of research, this is a good entry bottle because the price point, under $30, why not? Give it a shot. And, the first thing that right off the bat, it looks kind of like a cognac bottle. A little bit of marketing going on here. This kind of makes it feel like it's elevated, or it's sort of like fancier than it maybe necessarily it is. And then like the color of it, it's like kind of light, a little bit of a sort of a honey type of color. And I think that is a little bit of marketing there. Marketing and alcohol sales, they go hand in hand. I mean, that's what it's sort of all about from a company's perspective. So interested to see what this bourbon actually tastes like. 46.85% alcohol by volume. Okay, so 93.7 proof. That's pretty good. I'll take that there. This used to be called 1792 Ridgemont Reserve, but that has changed here. So now it's 1792 small batch. 1792, the year that Kentucky became a state. So I took some of your advice this week. I did this neat, okay, and I let it breathe a little bit before we started filming here. So that's what some of the commenters said. Let me know what you think about that. Let me get into this a little bit here. The nose, you could definitely smell vanilla, caramel, and you could smell the rye in this. Okay, this is considered like a sort of a high rye. The mash bill is undisclosed, but some stuff on the internet that says it's about 15 to 25% rye, which is obviously very high here. So you can kind of smell that on your nose here. So I'll get into this here. The first taste here, it's straightforward. You can taste that rye. I think that they say that it's brash and bold. I think that's what they want to say. Finish is sort of interesting. You get a little bit of a sweetness there right at the end, which that's kind of nice. First taste there, very straightforward. Not ton of complexity here, but that's sort of what this bourbon is about, huh? It's somebody who's just getting into drinking whiskey here. Maybe you don't want a ton of complexity. You just sort of like that first burn, and then you like that to trail off into a little bit of sweetness. Let me try it again here. Second taste, maybe not quite as bold, but still very straightforward here. I was reading that this 1792 used to have an 8-year age statement, but they've removed that. So maybe a little bit of that depth it's just not coming, the complexity there. But right off the bat, it's like, boom, here's some rye. You're going to taste that right off the bat. And it's sort of got that brash taste. But some people really like that. And, that's not bad. That's a good starter bourbon there, I would say for sure. Finish, sort of medium. It doesn't last forever there. And I would say a little bit of spice and then a little sweet. That kind of introduces at the end there. And it's pretty nice. So that's, let me show it to you one more time here. 1792 small batch. So if you're interested, if you like rye, but you're looking for a bourbon, 1792 small batch might be the right one for you. So that's going to do it for our episode this week here on Broncos and Bourbon. Once again, my thanks to Nate Jackson for joining us on the program. Make sure you check out Dumb Jock by Gorilla Sports. That's what he's doing. He also writes a weekly column for the team, so that could be something you also might want to check out. So my thanks again to Nate for joining the program. Thought he had some really interesting and informative thoughts on what's going on here with not just the Broncos, but some thoughts on the NFL as well. If you like this, please like and subscribe to the channel. It does go a long way. I should mention the bourbons that we review. I just go out and buy that, hopefully helping you make a decision the next time you're at the liquor store. Maybe, hey, you're having some people over to the house. You want to watch the Broncos game? Hey, here's a bottle that you might want to try this weekend. So liking and subscribing does go a long way because nobody's paying me to review these bourbons right now. So really appreciate you guys checking out the show and being part of the community. That's what it's all about. Leave a comment, please. I like the engagement. It's fun to talk Broncos, talk bourbon a little bit, and it's just fun. So really appreciate it and having a lot of fun with this show. So that's going to do it for us. For Broncos in Bourbon, I am Phil Milani.